from Missouri. Thank you all for being tolerant of a small room, and thank you for getting to know your neighbors really well. If we need to, the thermostat's on the back wall, so if we get really heated up in here, we can turn that down. You already did that? Okay. If you get cold, snuggle with your neighbor. It says Laquita, but I say we're going to snuggle, we're going to get real acquainted, but we're going to do it safe sanctuary, right? So before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about myself so you know who you're going to be spending the next couple of hours with. Right? Oh, I'm sorry. We go to 7, right? Well, let me tell you first of all, the very best news you're going to hear is I am laity. So I'm not going to be preaching today and I won't go long. How about that? I hear between 5 and 5:15 is when I'm supposed to let you out, depending on your questions. How about that? Is that what your expectations are? Yes. Okay, good. Well, again, my name is Kotan, and I hail from the Kansas City area. I haven't been home in 5 or 6 days, so I hope that I still have a home there. The Missouri Annual Conference was just before this, and so we did this workshop there. And then came on down here. I arrived here Sunday night, was able to spend some time with you all yesterday. And then I'm headed home tonight, so it's going to be a long drive tonight. Anxious to get home to my family. Here's my background. I come from the corporate side of the world. In the last about 17 years since my son was born, I have a son that is going to be a senior in high school. Yeehaw, good times, right? Ever since he was born, I have been self-employed, and I've been doing coaching and consulting ever since. Now, with my corporate background, most of that coaching and consulting to begin with was, of course, in small business and larger mid-sized companies. Well, there was a transformation process that came through my home church. And in the midst of that, about 5 years ago, I got swept into church transformation and coaching and have been doing that ever since. Some of you may be familiar with the Healthy Church Initiative in the Missouri Annual Conference. You all do a transformation process that's a little bit different. But we have been doing that now for about 7 years. I coordinate the Small Church Initiative. In Missouri, we call a small church anything under 80 in average worship attendance. And that is about 700 of our 860 churches. And I hear your statistics are pretty much the same here. So I'm a credentialed coach with the International Coach Federation. Anybody even know, have you ever heard of that? Mm-hmm. All right. And I have a partnership with a company called Leadership for Transformation, where we go into local churches and offer transformation, leadership development, community coaching, and a whole consultation process. Some of you may know me from a previous book. I co-authored a book with Bob Farr, who's our Director of Congregational Excellence in Missouri. It's called Renovate or Die. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but that book was about, okay, so we can't move the chairs around on the deck of the Titanic any longer, folks. We've got to get a little bit deeper than that. We can't just redecorate. We have to renovate. So Abington came to us and said, okay, we want something else. And you know, what they said was, now is the door locked yet? The door's locked. What they said was, you know, what we really need help with is evangelism. And I said, but you know, nobody buys evangelism books. It's that E word that we can't refer to, right? So, it's evangelism, but we didn't call it that. So you're in an evangelism workshop. Is that okay? Okay. All right. But I won't refer to it very long in case some of you, start to get twitches or anything. But that's truly what this book is about. All right? Here, the 3 major sections that I'm going to cover with you today are this. The first of them being how to find your own faith story. Until we find our own faith story, ladies and gentlemen, we are not going to be able to share it with others. So we're going to spend the first third of the workshop, how do we figure that piece out? The second part of our workshop today is going to be, now, once we have found our faith story, how do we share it with others? How do we get out in the community and share the good news of Christ? And then the third part is going to be, okay, now that we have guests coming to our church, are we prepared? Okay, now do you hear that I said guest? We don't have visitors. You know what the difference between a guest and a visitor is? 3 days. A visitor you tolerate, and a guest was welcome. And a guest you're welcome. Okay? Here's what I like to say. A guest is someone who just drops by unexpectedly. You don't know they're coming. So that means that they're on the front porch. You might let them in the front door, right? You might let them in the entryway, but they're probably maybe not going to come all the way inside because you're not prepared for them. Maybe you don't have the time for the visit, or maybe the dishes aren't done or the beds aren't made, right? And so it's a short visit, unexpected. But folks, what we're looking for are guests. And guests are people that we have made special preparations for. We're excited to see them. And they will come for a visit and stay. So are we preparing our church every Sunday, every day the door is open for guests? So how do we do that? That's going to be the third part. All right? Yes, sir.
I hate to admit it, but I'm a lay leader without a pencil.
A lay leader without a pencil. So does someone, a neighbor, look at that? We're already sharing. Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, did you hear that the other side of the room said you're the one that has to stay till 7? And clean up the room and vacuum. That's right. That's right. All right, so we had 4 basic observations. We've done, our team, the 3 authors for this book, we've done about 400 church consultations. And these are the observations that we found going into 400 different churches. The first of them being inwardly focused churches practice evangelism as reconnecting with those disconnected. So in other words, we're really concerned about people who got upset and moved away, and we just really want them back. Have you ever heard that before? Yes. Okay. Well, folks, they have found Christ. Maybe they didn't like the way they found Christ at your church, or they lost Christ at your church. I don't know what the story is, but they have been saved. But we spend a heck of a lot of time trying to figure out how to reconnect those folks. And how's that working for us? Okay. Our second observation, outwardly focused churches practice evangelism as connecting the unconnected to Jesus first and then the church. So that E word, it's not about, come to my church. How many of you remember what the title of this is? Get their name. Grow your church by building new relationships. So it's all about relationships first. The relationship with Christ and you, and then it leads back to the church. Because it used to be, we were in the attractional mode, right? In the 60s and the 70s, boy, we would build a church, we'd put the sign out, we'd open the door, turn on the lights, and guess what? They showed up. So we didn't have to do much. We just had to have the right programming inside, right? Well, again, how's that working for us? Our culture is working against us. Okay? Now, we can all fuss about the culture. We can do that, but I'm not sure how productive that it can be, because I'm not sure how much we can change that. But we have to figure out how to meet them where they're at and build relationships. And where they're at, folks, is not in church. They're out there. And if we continue to sit in our pews and hope for them to come, then we're going to continue the decline that the United Methodist Church is in all over the nation. Because you know where we used to go and send evangelists to, guess what? They're sending evangelists to us. Because we're in decline. The third observation is our pool of unchurched is shrinking, or our pool of churched is shrinking, and the pool of unconnected is growing exponentially. So, the harvest is ripe. We should be getting very excited about this. In any one given mission insight, usually 60 to 80% of any population is unchurched. 60 to 80%. So even when I'm working with the most rural church, and we do a 5-mile radius, they said nobody's around. Nobody's around. But if we do a mission insight report, and we pull up those stats, in a 5-mile radius, and sometimes in smaller churches, you can even go 10 miles, and sometimes in a smaller or a larger urban area, it's maybe just half a mile or a mile. But even in those small rural churches, many times there's 5,000 people. But yet, you hear inside the church, there's nobody living around here, or everybody goes to church. But if there's 5,000, then roughly 3,500 of those people are unchurched. We should be excited. But instead, we're all grumbling because our churches are in decline. And we're grumbling because we're sitting inside instead of getting out, building relationships. And number 4, membership versus discipleship. Y'all, people don't get excited about membership anymore. We don't even talk about membership much in Missouri. We talk about average worship attendance. How many people do you have in small groups? How many people are on discipleship pathway? So part of that guest preparedness is, once they come in, what are you going to do with them? And it's not take a membership class and join, because that's going to scare them off. Do you know what the number one thing that most young people want to do when they come into a new place, especially a religious organization? Sir, roll up their sleeves and get their fingernails dirty, go out and help someone and make a difference. So please, please, please do not put them on a committee. But yet that seems to be the first thing that we do, is we line them up to put them on a committee. Let them work it. Please don't. Please don't. So this is all about evangelism, and I coined evangelism as building authentic relationships with people we don't already know. Authentic relationships. So, okay, Jim, you always know that sitting on the front row you get to be played with, right? Are you a good sport? Oh no, sometimes. Okay, all right. So, Jim, we haven't met before today, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, Jim, if I walked up to you and I just said, hey, Jim, why don't you come over to dinner tonight? That'd be a little weird. What am I serving? Much very weird, right? Would that feel a little weird, having never met each other? Too much, too quick. Okay? But yet, that's what we've been trained to do, is say, hi, Laquita. Hi, Laquita. Come to church with me. Great, now we can come to church with me. Where's the authentic part of that? We've missed it. We have to build a relationship and trust before people will want to come into a church with us. So it's building those authentic relationships. All right, so let's get into the first section. How do we find our own big story? All right, there are 4 pieces to this, and it's like we're going to go back to school today. Okay, like you haven't been in school since you arrived here on Sunday, right? A little bit more. So, kind of like going to school. So we're first going to talk about how to faith share in service. That's like elementary level evangelism. And then we're going to go on to faith sharing in groups. That's junior high evangelism. And then we're going to do faith sharing in worship, which is high school evangelism. And then we're going to do faith sharing with the unconnected, which is college level evangelism. Okay, so understand that this is a metaphor, and I'm not going to teach you first to go into an elementary school and use this process. Okay, you got that? All All right, I just want to make sure we're okay here and we're all on the same page. Okay, so let's get started. Elementary evangelism, faith, sharing, and service. All right, now, Methodist folks, I'm a 4th generation proud Methodist. But we are excellent check writers, aren't we? We are so excited when we bring our green beans and our boxes of cereal and macaroni and cheese and put it on the altar and count them. Are we not? And folks, don't hear that I don't think that those are great things. But here's the difference. We have got to go to where we're helping those people with that food. So in after service, someone takes all of that food, right, out of the church. They put it in their trunk, and they drive it to some pantry and offload it onto a dock. Someone is the recipient of that, yes? But they have no idea who, or more importantly, why. So instead, what if we were serving the green beans to the person who's hungry? So how can we get in situations more where we are not only doing the good deed, but we're also sharing the good word and to tell them about the good news? We have to do it.
Take the dinner to their neighborhood.
There you go. Take the dinner to their neighborhood.
We have one Sunday a month to get homeless to come in and feed breakfast.
Okay. So the next step is, and maybe you're already doing this, are we sitting down, having conversations, praying with them?
You start a Sunday school class, right?
There you go. There you go. Many times we do things and we're there to serve them as opposed to walk alongside them. It's very different to have a mentality of going out and just serving as opposed to building a relationship. How many of you have ever worked like Habitat for Humanity? Okay. Do you meet the folks that are going to benefit from that? Build a relationship, continue to follow up, and then, and only then, when you have a relationship with them that's authentic, then it's a meaningful invitation. So Jim, if you and I had hung out for a while and we'd seen each other 2 or 3 times and then I invited you to my home, it would be a much more authentic, trusting invitation than just asking a stranger to come to dinner. But yet that's what we've been trying to do. So every opportunity is an opportunity to build a relationship with someone. And we know that building a relationship has to be done over time, and it takes investments. Yes? So if we're working a relay race, and we're going to hand out water, great. But we have to take it to the next level. And can we have a conversation, get to know them, get their names so that we can follow up? Or at least, do they know who that water came from, and more importantly, why you chose to serve their water? So we all have limited resources, yes? And I don't mean that resources is just money. What other kind of resources are there? Time. Isn't that a big one anymore? How many times do you hear, oh, I just don't have the time to do that? Energy? Some churches I go into, they're just out of energy. Right? So we have very limited resources, folks. So we have to learn what we can do to be the most effective. Many times you can be in churches that are busy, but they are in decline. Because it's all inwardly focused things. They're not doing anything outside their walls and connecting with people. Yes, sir?
And let your congregation know what you're doing, and don't operate. Some services are provided in isolation of the other.
Yes, that's a great example. What he was saying was sometimes services are offered in silos from one another. Great example, I was working in a church in central Missouri. And one of the things we asked them to go in and do a self-study, and one of the questions is, tell us the ways that you're connected in the community. And this church was running about 100 in average worship attendance, and they had 35 different organizations that they were connected to with their congregation. What I found out when we got in and had conversation with them was, well, you know, Jim goes and drives for Meals on Wheels on Tuesday, and Steve goes and works the local clothes closet on Thursday. But it had nothing to do in the name of the church, in the name of Christ. So people were serving in their own capacity. And that's great. But what I'm talking about is, how can we serve, like you were talking about, collectively in the name of the church, where we're doing good news, good deeds, sharing the good news. And I would much rather see you do many fewer ones and do it really well and be consistent and thorough and stay with it than these one-hit wonders.
Did you see a film here? They had, I think, a church in Russellville. They went to a laundromat and found soap.
Yeah. Yeah. Plug-in quarters and you can do that at a car wash too. Yeah. Another one is go to your local convenience store and say to the owner, I would love to buy the coffee for everyone that walks in here for the next 2 hours. So from 9 to 11 or 8 to 10 or whatever on a Saturday morning, I want to buy the coffee. And imagine when someone comes in and you're pouring the coffee and said, my compliments.
We do the burger bash, kids do the burger bash.
Yeah.
And people say, what are you doing this for? They stand on the corner and get up for your burger.
Right. And I hope they're telling them why they're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but do not say that you are doing mission work, folks, when it's a fundraiser. We really try to disguise a lot of things as mission work that are really fundraisers, don't we? Okay? If you are truly trying to meet people where they're at, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later with a bridge event, is there should be no fee for them to be involved. If there is something that they have to pay in order to build a relationship with you, that is a fundraiser. Let's just call them fundraisers. Okay? If it's a duck, let's call it a duck, right? But think about this. We say these are community events. Well, we have a big chili supper every year, right? Or we have a hunter's breakfast. I don't know. Am I talking things of your language yet? Okay. All right. You know, different regions have different things, right? And so we say, well, it's a missional thing. But yet we charge the hunters to come in. We're serving them. We're all standing in the kitchen talking with each other, and the hunters are all out there talking. Now you tell me how that's mission. Well, the community is invited. That's usually the response I get. Okay, folks, when we do that, we're asking the very people that we're trying to reach to pay for the ministry to reach them. Did you hear that?
Well, that's a good thing if you can pull it off.
If you can pull it off. Then again, Steve, how's that working for us? Right? But have you ever thought about that? We're raising funds from the very people that we're trying to reach. Now, tell me how that's mission, how that's missional, or how that's evangelism. So when we're doing our service work, what we want to make sure is that we have a clear invitation to connect with God and to our church. Build relations and connect to God and to our church. We must meet people where they are. Now, we have churches that say, well, you know, we want young families. We want young children. Well, we all do, don't we? Okay? But yet we continue to offer ministries that cater to the people that are already in our church, and the people that are already in our church are young people with children. But yet, we continue to do them because why? We've always done it. It's comfortable. Elda says it's comfortable. That's right. So folks, anytime we decide to do something, we have to start with a purpose in mind. Why are we doing this? What is our expected outcome? Because if we say, well, we're going to have a 100 harvest, and it's missional, because we want new folks in our church, then don't we plan a little differently? We put a little different methods in store when it truly is a missional evangelism event. So we're going to have people at the table getting to know people, sitting with them, eating with them, praying with them, having conversation with them. Get their name so that you can follow up. So always, let's call a duck a duck. If it quacks, waddles, and has feathers and a beak, it's a duck. Let's call it a duck. Let's call it a fundraiser. But always start with the mission in mind, the purpose, and the outcome, and then build into it. Then after you do any event, let's look at it. How effective was it? Did it meet the purpose we stood out to have it meet? And if it didn't, folks, we have two choices. How do we tweak it so it can next time we do it? Or we cancel it. We don't do it again. It seems like we can say yes and yes and yes, and it really is okay to say no in church. And we're expected to. If it's not a good use of our resources, then we shouldn't be doing it. How are we honoring God? By doing things that are not bearing fruit. And if we haven't named what kind of fruit we're trying to get out of whatever we're doing, then we haven't done a good job of planning again. We say, well, we've done a great job with Vacation Bible School. We only run 12 kids on Sunday. But by gosh, Vacation Bible School, we got 200 kids in here. Why are we doing Vacation Bible School? What's our intended outcome? And if it's to get families into our church, what are we doing intentionally through Vacation Bible School to make that happen? And if you tell me that if you're just putting them on the newsletter mailing list, I'm going to come around and crown you with this microphone. You tell me how putting them on a mailing list is building a relationship. It's just like all that junk mail you get, email. That's probably the category it's going to go in. If it's not authentic, if it's not coming from someone, from a place where they have relationships and they know that people care, it's not, oh, well, they put me on the list. But did we have someone pray for them? Do we have a prayer buddy for those names? Do we have handwritten notes? Do we have pastors in the room? They're probably going, what I want to say. Okay, all right. Laity, this is time for us to step up. There is no form letter that comes from the church office from the pastor. We have a responsibility too. Our pastors need to model this, yes. But each of us is called to build relationships with people so that they might know Christ. It's not just the pastor's responsibility. And you know what? I really discourage having evangelism committees. You know why? Because then we have another scapegoat. That's not my job. That's the evangelism's job. It's all of our jobs to do evangelism. We are never, ever done in ministry. So if you have people who can no longer be mobile and out and about, this is a perfect way to engage those people. They can still make phone calls and they can still be prayer warriors to connect with these folks. Yes, sir.
We do not have an evangelism committee per se, but we have an attendance register, and when visitors sign that, I collect those after church. I take it on myself to go home and call those people, thank them for coming, and invite them back again. 2 weeks ago, we had 6 new members in the church.
Wow. Very good, very good, very good. All right. Okay, so first of all, when we're out doing missions, it has to be building relationships. Okay? Now, we have now got past elementary evangelism, and now we're going to talk a little bit about faith sharing in groups, which is middle school evangelism. Okay. Now, it's not at middle schools, right, Jim? Okay, all right. It'd be great if you wanted to do that, but that's not the intention. It's a metaphor. Okay, so the intention is, now that we have begun to have opportunities to build relationships, now we want opportunities for people to be recognizing where God is at work in them and in the people that they're building relationships with. So anytime your church gathers in small groups, and I'm talking Sunday school classes, I'm talking true small groups that meet other times of the year, I'm talking ad board, I'm talking finance, I'm talking trustees, and on down the road. Anytime a small group gathers, we have to begin to practice and ask this question, and I hope it doesn't sound unfamiliar to you, is, tell me, Danny, where have you seen God in your life recently?
Okay,
Yes, sir.
we're fading out, we're not hearing.
I'm so
what
sorry.
you're saying back there.
I'll try to raise my voice.
Thank you.
Disciple one is a great place for that.
There you go. Every gathering, we need to be asking one another that. Does it sound a little Wesleyan? Okay? The reason this is important is we have to begin recognizing where God is at work in our life recently, this week. When we interview people at churches through a consultation, one of the very first questions we ask them is, tell me about your faith journey. Tell me about your faith journey. And do you know what we normally hear? Membership. Well, I was born into the Methodist church, this church, and then when my parents had to transfer to another city, then I went to this, and then I went through confirmation, and then I was married in this, and my husband was Catholic, so I converted him, and now he's a Methodist. And then I've been serving on SPR, and I've been on Ad Council, and I'm currently teaching Sunday school. Where's God in that? So as we begin to ask the question, we're looking for God in every piece of our life. And then we're able to share that with one another. And folks, until we get comfortable doing that again, how are we talking to other people about our faith until we're seeing where God's at work in our own life? So we must find our own story. How many of you are in business? Okay. We all have elevator speeches, yes? Okay. The intention is that you get into an elevator with someone else, and you push the floor, or they push the floor, and a conversation ensues, and they said, well, what do you do? And the intention is for you to be able to tell them about yourself from the time you go from one floor to the next, right? What is your faith elevator story? And I hope that it isn't just about 30 years ago. How can people get excited about that? Does that mean it only happens once every 30 years? Does that mean they're still waiting? How are we finding
Between the
that?
third and the fourth floor.
We're still, yeah. Third and fourth, or first and second, I'm wondering. It's a tall one. There you go. Okay. So think about going back to elementary evangelism, where we have just gone out and we've served somebody. So let's say we decided to rake leaves, all right? And we went out there and an elderly widow, maybe is where we ended up working, one group. Maybe you could do a service blitz, and you had several teams out over the community. And then you come back together. We eat, right? You all eat here too, right? We choose any time we can to have a potluck, right? Okay, so we come back and we potluck. And what a wonderful opportunity to ask that question. What a wonderful opportunity to say, so, Laquita, tell me, where did you see God at work in your service today? They're on fire at that point. And then we need to capture it on video, and we're going to use it a little bit later as we get to the next step. But take opportunities. It's always what's next. It isn't just about the event. But what are we going to do? What's the outcome? What's the next step with this process? So, we're going to pray every meeting in, we're going to pray every meeting out, and we're going to ask that question. Where is God at work in your life this week? Now, if you really want me to push you, then we could also say, so, where did you fall off your walk with Christ this week? Okay, now, I know I'm pushing. But let's just start with question 1 with the intention that possibly we could go to question 2 at some point. Because we have to build trust in our own small group first. So imagine we're not comfortable sharing that with people maybe that we've been in Sunday school class with for 20 or 30 or 40 years. But yet, there's an expectation that we can go outside our walls and do that? No. That's why we have to gradually work ourselves into learning about our faith story. So, let's get to college level. I'm sorry, we're at high school level. I skipped right over. Y'all were such good students, I was just going to let you fly over, right? Okay. All right, high school. Faith sharing and worship. Okay, so we want to start with leaders. One church was trying to get to electronic giving. You know, if you go to electronic giving, it's a much more consistent giving than anything else, right? So they were trying to get to that, and they first tried it, and it failed miserably. So they went back to the leaders and said, so what happened here? So they decided that the ad board would, for the first year, that they would all do electronic giving. And then at the end of that year, then they would decide whether they felt that they wanted to roll it out with the congregation again. At the end of that first year, then the pastor went to the leaders and said, so tell me, what was this process like for you? And out of that, guess what came? A testimonial. And then one of those leaders stood up in worship and talked about the powerfulness of tithing and what a difference it has made in their life and how they have been blessed. And they did like a 2-minute video. And then they rolled it out. And guess what? It was a huge success. Okay, so let's go back to our service blitz day. We've had a great event. We've been able to come back and share. I call them funeral potatoes. Do y'all know what that is, funeral potatoes? Oh, now that's a Missouri thing right now. Funeral potatoes. It's a hash brown casserole, you know, with sour cream and grilled cheese and all of that. So they always show up at funerals and Christmas and all of that. So we call them funeral potatoes, and that's always a Methodist potluck necessity. So anyway, so as you're enjoying your funeral potatoes and you're sharing about this faith experience, where you saw God at work, then we're videotaping. And then guess what? On Sunday morning, we can share it with those that weren't present because they missed out on that opportunity of hearing it. Or let's say someone in your small group had a powerful testimony. And so you go to the pastor and you say, Pastor, we've got a powerful testimony that needs to be shared in worship. And you videotape them and they share it. Now, you can do it live. It's just a little risky. Just a little, Larry, that's right. Okay, so y'all know it sometimes goes a little long, or a little goes off track, or so on. So if you video it, you can edit it. Yes, sir.
Something we did not long ago, we did a video of people with, like flashcards. They would have a placard, one side was the problem, the other side was how God brought the solution. And we made a video of, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 of them,
Right.
and showed it in worship.
Cool.
Powerful.
Cool. Yeah. Another thought is when you get ready to take up the offering, it's really difficult for people to get excited about paying the light bill. It's really kind of not very sexy paying the pastor's salary, no disrespect. But you just can't get really excited about that, can you? People don't. But what if there was a testimony about how someone was served and what it meant to them, and that was made possible by the gifts and tithes of income? Folks, we just have to connect it for them. We have to make connections on what our ministry is doing and how it's affecting people. That's what people can get excited about. We can't get excited about paying the gas bill or the propane bill. And I tell you, the younger folks won't even get very excited about doing stuff to your building. Okay? I'll tell you, when we do consultations, I sometimes hesitate doing anything with the building because we get all excited about remodeling because we know how to do that. We've done that before. We're comfortable doing that. I get to do that alongside people I already know. But if we ask them to go outside, it's a whole different story. And if I put both in a prescription, guess what they're going to do? They're going to spend all their time on their building and leave all that other stuff to the very last. And I would say that's what we've been doing for the last 40 or 50 years. Oh, if we just do this to our building. Oh, if we just offer this new program. Folks, we have got to lead the building. We have got to lead the building. And I would even say, okay, did I ever tell you, I coach and consult for a living. So my job is to make you uncomfortable. I probably should have told you that 30 minutes ago, shouldn't I? Okay? Okay? That's okay. Well, thank you, Chuck. My husband and my son would tell you that. We have got to get out of the building. And let's say that service blitz that I was just telling you about, let's go plug quarters to the car wash for people. Let's go pay for their coffee at the convenience store. Let's plug quarters into the laundromat. Let's just go clean out gutters for someone that needs it instead of church. Instead of church. And then we come back and we celebrate. And we share testimonies. Is the door still locked? Because there might be a stampede here in just a minute. Yes, ma'am.
That expression you just used is what we print on the back of like a neon green shirt, and every time we go to Moore, Oklahoma, go to wherever, the volunteers are wearing a shirt that says the church is like.
The church is left the building. Right. Yeah. So important. So important.
There's several churches I've been looking at and studying, reading up on, that are meeting in North Carolina, but they're not in a specific building. They're back in the old school, meeting in homes, in groups in homes, and they come together 4 times a year as a whole church to do service.
Yeah.
They don't come together to meet and worship 4 times a year.
Right.
They come 4 times a year to hand out the rakes and the whatevers, and then they go out and service in the community. And that's the only time the whole church meets together is in service. And then they worship in small groups throughout the rest of it.
Awesome. Yes, ma'am.
2 questions.
Okay.
You know, we talked about going out and buying coffee,
Mm-hmm.
but that's kind of, okay, that person's there, we bought them coffee, we talked to them for a few minutes, but that's not a relationship. You know, they come back to that place again, so that was kind of
we got to get out of the building. How do you get the people to follow me?
Hmm.
How do you get the rest of them out? I can't tell you how many times I've had to cancel projects.
So the first thing is, are we doing the first one? See, the first one is, we're just gonna go out and serve, and then we're gonna figure out, by pouring coffee, people aren't gonna bite us. Okay, and we're not gonna have to go thump our Bibles and scream at people on the street corners, because that's what they believe evangelism is. Okay, so that's the elementary part. Yeah, I'm pretty blunt, aren't I? Okay, so that's the first one.
Let's go to the nursing home and sing Christmas Carol.
Okay, so that's the first one, is just to get them comfortable. Then the second piece is the building relationships more so after we have got them out of the building.
Stamp your cups with the name of your church in the styrofoam cups.
Yeah, you can use your, a printer and get those little peel-off labels and put your church information on it.
Yeah, I would do something that isn't disposable if you're gonna do that, though, not to do, yeah, yes, sir.
What I find our problem is we have a few people who have great ideas, and the congregation says, oh yeah, amen, but I'm gonna let y'all do that. I led many people in the military, but I can't lead, like she was saying, I can't lead my people out.
This is a little off topic, but let me tell you what I believe is the problem, is we have a spiritual crisis in our church. Okay? I believe that we haven't spent enough time getting into the Word and building disciples. Okay? Just taking disciple 1 and disciple 2 and disciple 3, sitting in the pew for 30 years and sitting in Sunday school for 20 years does not make a disciple. Okay? We have to be intentional about building. So sometimes we have to take the step back and teach people about Christianity and help them get on their own spiritual journey path first before they can be out the doors. Yes, sir.
Some of it seems to work with us is you do what you can with what you have,
Right.
and the next time you wind up with a few more.
That's
Mhm.
exactly
And
right.
every time you go back out, it's a little bit bigger.
Right. Especially if those people come back and they're faith sharing and we're showing the video and what a difference that we make. That helps, that's a contagious enough too.
Great comment. Share what you just said.
Parking in the garage doesn't make you a car.
Parking in the garage does not make you a car, that's right. I love that. That's right. All right, so let's go on to college evangelism now. So then, all right, we practice servant evangelism, all right? Then we have started sharing in small groups, so we finally get comfortable with even saying the word and where God's at work in our own life. And then we're going to share in worship. And then this next step is faith sharing with the unconnected. So do you see we had to go through several steps before we're ready to go out into the community and build relationships with people in the name of Christ? So remember that relationships have to come before the invitation. Many times we go to the invitation. Oh, just invite somebody to church. Okay. Well, that's fine if you've been working with them for 20 years and you have a good relationship. I don't know, 20 years, but at least a year might be helpful to have a relationship with someone first. Okay? Relationship Sunday or special Sundays are a great reason to get people there. So, bring a friend day, whatever. But you have to just have a process to make that happen. You just can't say, okay, well, next Sunday is Friend Sunday, bring somebody with you. Okay? There's an intentional process to build up to that. 4 weeks in ahead, you might say, so who's on your heart that you know is going through a difficult time that's close to you that really could use Christ in their life right now? I want you to pray about them for the next 3 weeks. And the next Sunday, we remind them, who are those people you're praying for? And might you write them a note to tell them that you're thinking about them? And then maybe the week before, 2 weeks out, we say, all right, we prayed, we showed them more caring, and then what if you offer them an invitation? And please don't say meet me there. Elbow them in And that's what I would tell you folks is really we could dismiss evangelism and let's just talk about elbow. The real E word is elbow. You got to bring people in on your elbow. You can't expect for them to come in on their own. But they're not going to come in on your elbow until you have a relationship with them. Okay? Remember that an invitation, an authentic invitation, must be personal, specific, and relational. Do not extend an invitation unless it has those three components. All right, we're going to get into the second part of the book, and that is becoming a 21st century missionary. Does missionary scare you as much as it? Nah. Oh, you guys are broke in by now, right? Okay. The church has become an alien in our own world. Go back to those statistics. An average of 70% of people don't go to church. That's the reason that baseball games and soccer games and football games for kids can happen on Sunday and Wednesday night and school, right? There's even school stuff that goes on in the weekend. You know, when I was growing up a few years ago, those things didn't happen. You didn't have anything on Sunday and Wednesday because those were church days.
Or Wednesdays.
That's right. So, but folks, like I said, we could grumble about culture, but the culture is what it is. We have to learn how to be out in the culture and still be Christ-like and offer Christ to people the same way. Yes, ma'am?
I'm a retired teacher. There's a typing mistake up there. Become an alien.
All right.
An alien.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
And I will tell you again that all of us are called to be missionaries. Not just the pastors, but each of us. Okay? And I would say, let's not just be a church, but let's be a missional church. If I say a missional church, what does that mean to you all? Looking outward. Okay, so if I said, what is the mission of your church, what would you all say?
Most people would say to make you realistic.
To sit and take care of one another? Yeah, sorority, fraternity, country club. Okay. Okay. We can have debates all day, and I do strategic ministry planning with churches, and I just say, you know what, folks, we don't have to spend time figuring out what our mission is. It's been given to us. The reason each and every one of our churches exist is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Now, I would say, go and make new disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Kind of goes back to that pin jumping. We don't need to bring in Baptists. We don't need to bring them in from other Methodist church or Catholics or whatever. But people who don't have a relationship with Christ, that's our purpose. So let's just figure out how we do that instead of sitting in rooms trying to figure out what our mission is. Now, the difference is our vision. The vision of every one of your churches is different. Because the vision of your church is how you uniquely will go about the mission. And that uniqueness is founded through what are the needs of your community. Each of your communities is different. What are the gifts of your leaders? Those are different, congregation to congregation. And what are the passions that are in your congregation? For folks, when you figure those three things out, the intersection of those three things is your vision. And that's the unique way that your church will live out the mission.
The last one was what?
Passion. Gifts, passion, and needs. Gifts, passions, and needs. Okay? And then everything else should circle around that. So, if you decide to do something, what's the intended outcome? Why are we doing this? If it's not making new disciples or growing up new disciples to make new disciples. And I have to ask, why the heck are we doing it, folks? And if it's a fundraiser, let's not call it ministry, let's just call it a fundraiser. Okay, Jim, that's my pet peeve. Can you, you got that one? That's the only thing you're going to walk away with today, right? Okay. All right. So to become a 21st century missionary, we have got to engage our radar. Think of Radar on Nash. Y'all remember Radar on Nash? He knew everything before everybody else did, right? Okay? So how do we engage our radar to be a missionary? Okay? First of all, we have to have an intentional plan. Now, if you were a church planter, I coach some church planters, and they have some real goals. They have to go out and make usually at least 10 new relationships every day. Okay? To plant a church, that's what they're having to do. Okay, I'm not going to make you answer this question or even turn to your neighbor to answer it, but when's the last time you invited someone to church? When's the last time you brought somebody in on your elbow? Now, laity, here we go again. Ready? Buckle in. I hope we're not churches that we are expecting our pastor to be behind the desk to answer the phone when we have a hangnail. Okay? How many times do we want our pastor to take care of us? That's the first priority. And when we say, when they are there at the other end of the line taking good care of us, right? And we say, good job, pastor, guess what? You get another year. But then, when Jim goes out and instead is spending time in the community, meeting new people, that means he's not around as much for me. Then we'll say, now Jim, I haven't seen you much. You're not answering your phone. You must be out playing golf. Guess what? Next. DS, we want a new pastor. He's not taking good care of us. Do we not have those conversations, folks? Now, if they're truly out playing golf and bringing new people in off the golf course, then we should be paying their green fees. If they're out playing golf and we see no fruit, then again, we have to say, Pastor, is there a better way to be spending your resources? So our pastors need to be out in the community, and that is not necessarily sitting on the Kiwanis and the Chamber of Commerce and all of that. Maybe, but it has to be with intentionality of being missional, not just we want him to be out in the community, he or she. Intentionality. In everything we do with church, it has to be with intentionality. So we have that expectation of our pastor, and we actually award pastors that do that. And the award is not, you get a new job and a new zip code. The award is, thank you, Pastor, for your heartbreaking for those that don't have a relationship with Christ. Your pastor is not called to your church. Your pastor is appointed to your community. Are we giving them the opportunity to be in the community? Now, are we holding them accountable for building relationships while we're doing it? Those are great questions that we should be asking. But we also need to be giving them the opportunity to do that.
Could you repeat that? The pastor is not?
The pastor is not appointed to your church. The pastor is appointed to your community. So we have expectations of our pastor to be out in our community building relationships and modeling that E word. Elbow, right? Elbow.
Recently, our pastor wanted a second church,
Mhm. 2-point church.
Came to the SPR and he said, the other church wants to know what my office hours are gonna be for each, and our SPR committee said, we don't want office hours set for you.
There you go.
We can reach you by text, Facebook, phone, whatever.
There you go. Everybody has a cell phone. There's no reason to sit behind the desk. That's right. Okay. So we have expectations of our pastors to do this and certain goals. What are our goals as laity? So if we ask our pastor to be out one day a week, building relationships, the pure purpose of building relationships, then as laity, can we be called to at least an hour a week? I'm pushing you, Ralph, aren't I? Right? So let's say, do you have 50 or 75 people in your church, or 100? Let's say there's 100 people. That's 100 hours of evangelism every week if we have that commitment. What a difference that would make. Plus what your pastor is doing on top of that. Now we're cooking, right? Now we can make a difference. Now, that's not to say that you're going to go and spend an hour and bring somebody in every week for that hour. If so, you probably are a salesman and have a fantastic job in sales. Right? But folks, we are already in places where we can build relationships. I'm not asking you to go up to strangers and start a conversation. It's going to be a natural process within the places you already visit. For example, instead of swiping the card at the gas pump, try going to one gas station most of the time and going in so you have the opportunity to converse with someone at the counter and build a relationship over time. When you go to the grocery store, what about going mostly the same day where you might have the same people so you could go to the same clerk to build a relationship?
Just don't get in front of me, please.
Okay. But it's not a sermon. It's not a sermon. That computer that you're putting in.
check out, you know.
Oh, the sound check. There you go. Okay. There you go. So beginning outside conversation has to start with goals for your pastor and also for us as laity. It has to involve building trust. No one is going to hear an invitation until it's authentic and you have built trust with them first. And it has to be coming from a place of mutual respect. Okay? We have to become a model. So how do we create opportunities for new relationships? How much time are you spending with unconnected people?
Obviously a lot if it's 80% of the people out there.
Okay? All right, so pastors, again, and laity, are we giving them permission for this? Are we spending time on the urgent, or are we spending time on the important work of the church? Okay, the urgent are those things that are the fires. And we're constantly putting out fires instead of looking forward and being outwardly focused. So are we giving our pastor opportunities to work on the important and not the urgent? Are we creating urgent for our pastors?
But see something as urgent and we don't, we badmouth it.
Mm-hmm. So how do we have conversations so that we can clarify that? Right? However, if we're being a missional church and we have a shared vision, those things won't come up as often. Okay? Now, there are 3 different altitudes for ministry. This is ministry according to Kay, so it's nowhere to be found. Okay? All right. When we're doing the urgent, we're in the fire trap, fighting the fires on the ground. Now, how much visibility do you have when you're fighting fires? You're on the ground, you have the smoke, you have the heat. All you can do is keep from getting burned. Right? It's a defensive act. Okay? I want you to give your pastors time to be on the balcony, or what I like to say, in the helicopter. How can we at least get up here in a hovering mode to see the big picture? What's going on in our church that's effective and ineffective, and where do we need to be working? But then we also need to be giving our pastors and our leaders the time to be in the 747. And that 747 time is normally time away from the church. Are we giving opportunities for that pastor to be fed spiritually by other pastors? Are we giving them spiritual retreats to renew themselves? To do visioning, to do planning, to do ministry planning? Are we doing that for our teams? Normally, churches only work on the ground fighting fires. So how are we giving opportunities to work on the important? So let's go over 8 strategies real quickly on how to build new relationships. First of all, you start in your normal affinities. So if you're already working out at a gym, are we going in with blinders and just thinking about getting through the yoga class or the spin class or whatever? What if we instead put our radar up and said, you know what? I'm going to meet somebody new and just start a conversation with them. Now, I know some people just swallowed really hard. Okay? So, let me give you an example. I like to go to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Have any of you ever been to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico? Yay, there's one of us. Okay, 2. All right. So I go every year. And so whenever I see anybody wearing a shirt that says Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, I get kind of excited. Right? So that is a great way for me to start a conversation. Oh, have you been? Or was it one of those t-shirts that somebody went and brought you back? So how often do you go? Where do you stay? What's your favorite things? What person doesn't like to talk about their vacation? Right? One of my co-authors loves to ride Harleys. So he rides his Harley around a lot on the weekend just so he's hanging out with other people, because then they can talk bikes first. Because then you've established something to talk about because you have something in common. So there's all sorts of ways of people around you that you can just start normal conversations that are not going to be threatening to you or to them. Okay?
You do the same thing in the checkout line at Walmart.
There you go.
When you go long line and there's a price check.
That's right. That's right.
I'm not a good witness in those that.
All right. The second one is member guest events. If you really want to put people on edge and do this elbow thing well, here's what you can do. Any event that you have at your church currently, you establish a rule. You as a church member or regular attender cannot attend until you bring someone outside the church to also come with you to the event. So we're going to have a fishing tournament. You can't enter until you bring someone along with you. Okay? Make it fun so people will want to come. I mean, that's not what you do for a Bible study. You get that, right?
Right.
Okay? That's not the entry point for folks. Okay? But something that they like to do, it could be knitting classes, it could be parenting classes, it could be an outing, it could be a golf tournament, who knows? But any of those things that you're already doing, get it to the point where people who aren't connected with the church are also a part of this. So imagine spending 4 hours on the golf course. Do you not think you're going to be building some relationships with people that are not coming to the church if they're a part of the tournament? So create the opportunities with things you're already doing. Let's get outside our comfort zone. Like I said, go inside to pay for your gas. We have no margins left in our life, folks. We are go, 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 and we don't feel that we even have time to go in and pay. It's a convenience. Yes, it's a convenience. But if we are Methodist and we believe that each of us are a missionary, then isn't that part of our responsibility to let other people know of Christ? Routine introductions. Are you to the point where you are networking with people who are also going to help you network with other people? People only had, think of a Lego, everybody got that? 8 knobs on there. 8 knobs on my Lego. That means I only have room for 8 really close relationships. That's the average for most of us. Now, if you're like me, most of our relationships are from our church family, right? Because those are the people we hang out with. So guess what happens on Sunday?
All hang out together.
We're all hanging out together. So when a guest comes in, are we willing to lift one of the people off our Lego or 2 so that we can be available to that guest on Sunday? I'm meddling again, aren't I?
All right, come on.
You're smiling too much.
All right, Larry, you're hanging with me.
If you really wanted to go outside the box, you could actually sit with them.
Well, here's what I would even suggest is that we sit with them and then, gosh, do we invite them to lunch? Introduce them to our pastor.
Fellowship, you know, individual, Sunday school service or whatever.
Right. Right. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for getting them a cup of coffee as opposed to, there's the coffee pot, help yourself. Right? People, when they are a guest in your building, they need to find 3 things easily, and that is restrooms, where worship is, and where children's stuff is. And I should be able to find that without human interaction. I hope that's not the case. But your directional signage inside should be so that I could find those things without human intervention. Okay? We need people outside the building. How many of you have more than one entrance?
We have every entrance.
Okay? So I hope every entrance has a person. And, well, first of all, the door's unlocked. And then there's a person.
Both doors have to be unlocked.
There you go. I actually was doing some work at one church, and it was pouring down rain, of course. And I did not know what door to go in, because there were 4 doors. Okay? And I really didn't want to go to a door that wasn't unlocked and get caught in the rain, right? Then have to come back to my car and wait for somebody else to. So I waited until somebody showed up. And I followed that person in. And we open the door and we get in, and we are inside an elevator. This is a true story. I walk 1 step in the door and we are in an elevator. And this woman, was kind and said hello. Didn't ask me my name or why I was there, but said hello. And she pushed a button, and then the doors opened and she got out. So I got out. She went on, and here I was in this big long hallway, had no idea where to go. Now, my number 1 concern was, what if I wouldn't have gone in with her? I would have been in an elevator, and gosh, what button would I push? There were more than one option. And I'm thinking, what if I was a real guest here? I might have given up and go, gosh, if I could just find that door to get out of here, I'm gone. Okay? So ask some people that are not already connected to your church, that haven't been in your building, to come in and just experience worship and give you some input. That would be very helpful. Very helpful. Yes, ma'am.
Just to grow on that, as we were looking at the signage, ask people that are not connected with your church, and give them a little scenario card that you're a parent with 3 children. You gotta get 1 to youth, and you get 1 in the nursery, and ask them to find their way.
Right.
And they'll
Great
give you
idea.
some real good feedback on how they find what they need to.
Great idea. Great idea. All right, so create hangout places. Okay? So you're out in the community. Where are you going to hang? Do you hang at Starbucks? Do you hang at Panera? On Saturday morning, do you go and hang at your local coffee bar? Then do that. Every Saturday morning from 9 to 10, I'm going to be hanging here, and I'm going to intentionally have 3 conversations with people that I don't already know. It's simple, folks. Just go where you normally go, but put the radar up and have intentionality of beginning to have conversation with people. Offer blessings. Open the door for somebody. Greet someone on the street. You know, if you're in a restaurant and there was a ton of children at a table next to you and they didn't ruin your dinner from misbehaving, then stop by that table on the way out and say, you know what, I just have to let you know your children were so well behaved and I so appreciate that as a fellow diner. Do you know how good the parents would feel about that? Now ladies, it's really fun to open doors for men. It freaks them out.
Oh, no, please.
And that in itself creates a conversation. Then, what are the organizations that you're involved in? And how are you making connections there? Are you in organizations that are outside your church, first of all? And if so, is there any intentionality of building relationships? See, folks, I think we compartmentalize our church world. This is our church, and then this is everything else. And the two shall never meet. But I don't think that's what Christ intended. As we move about in this world, I think Christ intended us to share our faith with others. All right, so we're there. We put on our big boy pants, and we are going to start a conversation, right? We've revved ourselves up. We've had our coffee. How's it going to go? Folks, we have to first find a common ground to start a conversation. And then it isn't about telling our story. See, that's what we get nervous about is, oh my gosh, they're going to ask me about something in the Bible, and I'm not going to have the knowledge to pull it off. And I'm going to get really scared about that. But that's not what they want to know. They want to know why, first of all, you even want to have a conversation with me. Is it real? Is it authentic? And you know, people will say, well, you know, I really like this person because they just are so caring. But typically it's that caring person that all they did was listen. As a coach, 80% of the conversation on the phone when I have with pastors is them talking. And I've done well if I allow that to happen. If I've talked more than 20% of the time, then I'm not a good coach because it's all about them. And that's what we need to do when we're thinking about connecting with other people. It's all about them. Listen to their story. Watch for signals. What are they telling me that I can connect with? And then how do you build a bridge between the two? So for instance, there was a man that went into a kind of a bar and grill with a bunch of other pastors. Okay, he was a pastor, a bunch of other pastors. And these pastors were in their own little world, talking about how us lay people make their jobs difficult, probably. Okay? And they were just about ready to go, and this particular man noticed that someone at the other table had on a Harley t-shirt. And so he turned to him and said, so I see your Harley t-shirt, are you a rider? Well, the man perked right up and said, well, yes, I sure am. And he said, are you? And he said, yes. And so, of course, they had to talk bikes and what kind they were and how loud they were. They were both Harleys. So we always have to talk about the sound of Harleys, right? And then it turned into a Mustang conversation because one of the men had traded in a Mustang for his Harley and so on. And then, so the man who was sitting at the next table said, so what are you doing here? What brings you to town? Are you from here? And he said, no, I'm from St. Louis. Well, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm at a pastor's convention. You're a pastor? Wow, I would love to go to a church with a Harley riding pastor. Okay, so it was just noticing a t-shirt. And that man's eyes were open to something that he never thought that a pastor would look like. So find a way to bridge the conversations. Know your elevator story. Your elevator story should be, first, why God? Why do you want God in your life? Why do you care? Why is that important to you? And why should I care about being a part of a church? And then third, why your church? Why is God important in my life? Why is a church important in my life? And then why my church? Why would I want someone to be in my church? Then you have to make sure you get the name and a way to contact them. You've got to follow up to build the relationship. Or if it's a local kind of thing, you continue to go back in and continue the conversation. Now, does all that happen in one setting? Most of the time not. It's a little bit at a time. It's a gradual conversation. As more trust is built, then you get to the point of sharing your faith story. If you get to the point of sharing your faith story on day one with a stranger, it's either a real exception to the rule or you're pushing it and you're going to scare them off.
Or they're really hurting and they need to hear it.
That's correct. You do know why people would show up at church, not on the elbow and not a relative of someone, right?
Crisis.
A crisis. I always say something big is up in their life. Something big. A move, a new baby, a divorce, a 12-step, lost a loved one to death. I mean, we can name them all. It's something like that that has brought them in if they're not on the elbow with somebody else. And if we're not asking them questions and showing concern, they're not looking for a friendly church. I have yet to meet an unfriendly church. But they're looking for friendships, relationships. And that's what we have to provide. But if we're just worried about making dinner plans with the people those 8 people connected on our own Lego, we're going to miss the opportunity. Sometimes we send mystery worshipers into churches. Yes, we pay people to go to church to give us their impression. And sometimes if we can do a really good job of being hospitable before service, then we're terrible at it after. Because we're too concerned about what are we going to do after church. And we've ignored our guests then. So what's your connection process once somebody's in church?
I try real hard, and we're really good at trying very hard during announcements when we recognize, new faces, getting them to sign the guest book.
That's
We try to catch them when they first come in. Oh, hi, how are you? My name's so-and-so, welcome, blah, blah, blah. Our guest book is right here. We'd love to get your name and number so that, and at least at some point before they leave, get their name and address.
Usually
And
people
they
are,
want to do
right.
that.
Right. Most people are more responsive to a one-on-one conversation. They'll tell you, but they won't write it down, especially in something as formal as a guest book. So we need an informal process to get that. So instead, when we see someone, if you have a greeter at the door, right? We all have greeters at the door. Yes? Okay. All right. Then we have a connector person. And the connector person, and we're really already getting into the next one, and the connector person is someone whose job that day is to receive guests. Now, we're all going to be hospitable, right? But sometimes we get a little overly excited when we have guests, especially if we don't have them very often, and then we overwhelm them. Yes? Okay? And especially, if they have kids, oh my gosh. That's right. That's right. So, what we have to do is, what's our process? How do we handle guests? So if I'm the connector, and Jim is the greeter, and then he has introduced, and he'll say, okay, we have a new person with us worshiping for the first time. Here's Laquita, and Laquita, this is Kay. So now, Laquita, I'm your connector, not that I'm going to be introduced that way, but you and I are joined at the hip for the day. Okay? So Laquita, come and tell me, could I get you some coffee or some juice? So what brought you here today? Okay? So do you have any family? Whatever those questions you might be, and say, would you join me and my family in worship and sit with us? Okay? And then someone is there, especially if they've never been to church, they don't know when to stand up or sit down or, those automatic responses that some of us have if we're doing that in church. okay? And then after church, I'm gonna say, Laquita, I'd like for you to come and meet our pastor. So I'm gonna make that introduction, right? And then I'm gonna say, and Laquita, I'd love to be able to follow up with you again. So would you, here's my name and number, and would you mind sharing yours with me? Okay? And then maybe within 24 hours, she gets something on her doorstep. And I may knock the door, but it's a screen door visit. Please do not go in, folks. That's what people are afraid of. Right? And I'll say, Laquita, here's some baked cookies. And it was just so great to have you. I'm not coming in, but I just wanted to let you know again how much I enjoyed meeting you. And I'm really anxious to get to know you. And I'll see you next Sunday. If you need a ride, you let me know and I'll come get you. Folks, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for a postcard. They're looking for a relationship.
We have
Yes.
a kind of a kinky little problem. We actually have many guests.
Mhm.
But we actually are also a small church, so I'm not sure we've got enough connectors to do
There you
that.
go. So the next thing, if we're having lots of guests and they're not sticking,
Well, they're purposely not sticking. We have a lot of visitors to the lake.
okay,
So we're a kind of a church away from home for
Gotcha.
people. But that doesn't really mean you shouldn't pay any
that's
attention to
correct.
it.
That's correct.
It's just that I'm not sure this'll work, so I just thought I'd pick your brain for something else.
The connector piece,
I mean, the connector can only just attach him or herself.
sometimes there's a connection team if need be. So there's more than one person that is available for guests on Sunday. It just depends on what the needs are of your church.
Okay.
Yeah, yes ma'am.
We have that too, on hot springs and lakes and
Mhm.
on there, some,
Right.
while they're traveling and they can see our
Right.
little church and but St. Joseph Hospital is right there. on the
Right.
Hill where I live.
Mhm.
And we have people that come doing for church, who have sick people in the hospital.
Right. And they really need a connection, don't
We
they?
pray with them and,
Yeah.
for
That's great.
them for Sunday after Sunday, and sometimes they'll get back.
That's great. That's great. All right, so let's quickly, we're running out of time here. Creating an outwardly focused culture. So let's say we've gone out to the community, we've learned how to share our story, and now how are we getting our church ready? Okay? First of all, we have to do strategic ministry planning to identify the mission, or what I say is accept the mission, figure out what your vision is, and then what are your core values? What drives your church? Now you're going to say, well, how do we do that? Are you a church that's all about music? Are you a church that's driven by Bible preaching? Are you a church that's driven by small groups? Is it all about prayer? Are you a prayer warrior church? It's already existent, you just haven't named it. You've got to figure out what drives your church. Okay? And then, what are those goals? What are the 3 to 5 things this year that your church is going to do to help you grow into your vision? A vision is also talked about as your preferred future. So what are those 3 to 5 things your church is going to do this year to grow into the vision and be a missional church? And then you have to figure out the objectives. And the objectives is really the ministries. So what are those things that you're going to do on a day-to-day basis that are going to help you achieve those goals that will help you live into your mission and vision within the boundaries of your core values? So most of the time we go to the calendar and we say, okay, well, last January we did this, this, and this, okay, transfer it over. Last February we did this, okay, transfer it over. Okay, and then we bring committees together to try to do it. Folks, don't. Do this first, and then we figure out what's going to help us get to our goals. Let's be missionally driven instead of calendar driven or tradition driven, which is normally what we've done. We also have to make sure that we are equipping people. We have to have an intentional process of not only equipping our current leaders, but are we doing a good job of equipping the next generation? Okay, how many of you been on nominations or lay leadership, whatever you call it here, right? How painful is that? And it's just like, just say yes, just say yes. I just gotta put your name down on a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything. Or, better yet, we won't make you do anything. It's just a formality. Or you know what? If you can, if you can fog up a mirror, you're in. Right? Okay? So how can we simplify structure? Get rid of all committees except those required by Book of Discipline under a single board model. That's a whole other workshop. And then develop teams of people. We bring teams together to do something, they do it, and they disband. No more 3-year thing. We're coming together to meet an objective for a goal to help us meet our mission and vision. Because then they can get excited about what they're doing because they see their part as part of the bigger picture.
Okay, we were talking,
We'll talk about that after, okay? You remind me. All right, so the next is modeling. How are we modeling a missional focus on what we're doing as leaders and our pastor for the rest of the congregation? Everything we do should be answering the question of, how is this making disciples and bringing up new disciples, equipping new disciples to bring up new disciples? Every person in your church should know the reason that your church exists is to make new disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And if they don't, we've got some work to do. Because then a lot of this stuff that we fight about will go away when we all figure that out. Okay? And pastors, you got to preach it until you see it. Preach it, preach it, preach it. We got to talk about evangelism. We got to talk about tithing. We got to talk about God moments until we do it. Okay? Now, there's a lot of different connection strategies. And they're all outlined in the book. And I'm not going to have time to go over all of them. But folks, we have to make sure that we have strategies in place when they show up. And how do we get them to show up? That it can't be left to chance anymore. The attraction model is dead. Let's bury it and get on with intentional ways of connecting. We also have to make sure that our facility is ready and is guest friendly. Now, you all have probably been wandering the hallways of your church for a long time, and we began not to notice things. So again, invite someone from the outside to go through your church. Most of the time we need to declutter our churches. We save things and save things and save things. We put bulletin boards up, get rid of them, let's put screens up, okay, so they can be updated. And you know what? The website has to be great.
if you can talk the pastor and the congregation into getting the internet, I'm all for it. I'll take care of the website.
Most people shock you on your website before they give you the opportunity to show up. Unless it's an elbow opportunity. For those people that are just going to connect because they moved to town or you know something's up in their life, they're going to shop you first on your website. So you have to make it through that filter before you have the opportunity for them to show up. And most of the time it's outdated information. Or, please, your homepage, I don't care who your pastor is if I'm a guest. Tell me when you're open for business. When's worship? You usually have to dig and dig to find worship. That should be right there. What's your mission, your vision, and when are you open for business? When can I come and see? Okay?
I have a technique that happens in many churches, and that is alienate your visitor by not including them in the worship service. If you're gonna sing a song, you got to put it in the bulletin, they got a page number. Don't just break out.
Okay, Steve, you're singing my song. We alienate people in our worship service. And the way we do that, folks, is we talk insider language. Nobody knows what a North X is but us Methodists.
Of what?
Okay? All right, if you tell me that the,
It's a lobby, call it a lobby.
okay, if you tell me that the quilting club is meeting at Thelma's on Thursday from the pulpit, first of all, we shouldn't be doing that stuff from the pulpit, people. Secondly, who's Thelma? Who's invited? Where does she live? That's insider language, so obviously that must be a family thing and I'm probably not invited.
Can I share a story? I moved from another congregation to the Methodist church, and the ladies were very friendly. They wanted me to come to the women's group. So my girlfriend, who's my best friend now, said, would you come Monday night to watch? And I was kind of offended because I really wanted to come and participate.
So they asked her to watch and didn't ask her to participate from the beginning. Right, right. And if you call them out, don't ask people to stand up. That weirds them out too, if they're guests, right? Okay, so put yourself in their circumstances. And what Steve was saying was, if we're going to sing songs, we need to either have the hymnal, better yet, put them up on the screen so people can see them. Even the Lord's Prayer, we know it, folks, but people who have not been raised in a church aren't going to know it. You know, in our response, and also with you, they don't know that. Okay, so every time we plan worship, let's plan and anticipate guests. And let's make it friendly for guests. We cater to the people that are already there as opposed to being guest friendly. And if you do a meet and greet, how many of you do a meet and greet? Hug your neighbor, pass the peace. Okay. Now, some people are uncomfortable with that. If you insist on doing it, please hold it to less than a minute. Okay? All right? Most of the time, people are crisscrossing the church all over. Now, why they couldn't have said hello when they came in, I don't get it. They have to wait for permission from the pastor to say it's okay to greet your neighbor. But it is not a guest-friendly activity, and especially if it goes too long. Joys and concerns are the same thing from the pulpit. Again, did I walk into a church where I'm going to be welcome, or did I just walk in to some big family's Thanksgiving dinner and I'm an outsider? Because if you're talking about Aunt Louise's surgery, and she's still in the hospital, and you all know what she's gone through, and she has and we tell the whole history. First of all, we've got some HIPAA problems with that. And then secondly, again, a guest feels outside. So we get all excited when the pastor starts saying, we're not going to do joys and concerns anymore, and we push back. But folks, there are newsletters and emails and small groups to take care of that. That's why all those things exist. We don't have to do all that in worship. Always be thinking about your guest. Okay? Look at signage inside and out. Always have a process on how to get their name. Always a process on how to get their name. And then, once someone starts coming for a while, what's the process to get them connected into a ministry? And somebody should be responsible for that person. It's not, oh, well, they're a regular attender. But you know what? If we don't get them connected somewhere else, they won't even be a regular attender anymore. So what's your connection process to get them involved into a small group? And then, what's our process in making a disciple? A discipleship pathway is not curriculum. Please don't have a pathway that says you take this class and this class and this class and then you graduate. It's how are you growing to be more Christ-like? What are the behaviors, the characteristics that we're trying to instill in people as they grow more Christ-like? That's a discipleship pathway. It's not about another class. Now, curriculum helps you plug in to develop those characteristics. But have we even named what those characteristics are? Or those behaviors, or those attitudes? The lobby needs to be very receiving, very welcoming. Okay? And if you all already have an entrance and you're serving coffee, it's fellowship, that's great. But make sure that you're recognizing when guests come in. Sometimes we get too excited about our own fellowship when we don't know that somebody else has showed up. Okay?
I don't know whether it's covered in your book or not, but space in churches, as you know, is a premium.
Mhm.
And you don't have to have a specific room for these activities. You have to look at your space and combine. In our church, it's a combination of a library, it's a meeting place.
You have to get creative, and sometimes it even has to be outside.
Yes, yeah.
You know, during proper season, you can even have that hospitality outside. Let's see. After worship experience, like I said earlier, sometimes that's our worst time with guests. What is our process after worship with guests? What's the next step? How are we connecting with them? How are we making them feel comfortable? And social media, that's not just the website, but are we doing Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn? What are those other pieces that we're doing out there on the web? Okay? Relationships matter. It's all about relationships. We need to take somebody from an outsider. We've gone out, we've built a relationship with them, and now they're a guest. And then, once they come into our church, how do we get them from a guest to connected? And then how do we get them from connected to a disciple? And then the final step is, how do we get them from a disciple back out in to duplicate themselves as a missionary? All right? I'm going to give you one bonus little thing here. Ready? This is what you do for a bridge event. Bridge events are one of my favorite things, and one of the things that every church should be doing. You have to decide how many you can do based on your resources at your church. This is the thing you're going to walk away remembering from me. Create a bridge event that is a P-free zone. P-free zone. That is the letter P. A P-free zone. Okay? A true bridge event has no preaching, no prayers, no pocketbooks, preaching, prayers, pocketbooks, and pressure. Did I get that? Right? Preaching, prayers, pressure, and pocketbooks. So it should cost them nothing, and it should not be a revival. Okay? The whole purpose of a bridge event is to build relationships with people in your community. It needs to be outside your building and preferably off church grounds. Well, no, they don't need to bring anything. Okay? So make sure it's a P-free zone. It costs them nothing. It's a fundraiser. Something that they would like to come to. How do they like to spend their time? And then, how are we going to get their name and follow up? How are we going to get their name and follow up? So let's say we have a bike safety clinic. Okay? We invite them in. We're going to do bike safety checks. And then we're going to give away a new bike. Okay? It's going to cost you some money to do this, folks. All right? We're going to give away this bike. So put your name in the hat to win the bike. And then guess what? We've got names to follow up and build relationships. We've got names to follow up and build relationships. All right? Now, nothing is going to be helpful here if all you do is come to this workshop and say, I got really close and friendly with some folks. I met this woman who's kind of crazy from Missouri. And then we walk out of the room and nothing happens. So the next thing you need to do is read the book. It's going to go much more in depth. And we have done a companion, which is a workbook, which means that you can take this to your ad council, to your Sunday school class, to your small groups. And this will walk you through learning the process. Because we have to learn how to apply it, not just read the book. So we're going to read, we're going to study together, figure it out, and then we're going to go out and apply it in our community. All right? Before we go, may I pray for you? Yes. Thank you very much, people, for your attention, for squeezing in here and the opportunity to be with you in the Arkansas Annual Conference. Let me pray for you. Gracious and loving God, thank you for this opportunity to be pushed a little. Lord, thank you for the opportunity that these people have allowed me to push. Lord, we know this evangelism work is tough. And sometimes it's scary, and Lord, sometimes we don't know how to do it. So God, we ask that each of us be open to the nudging in our hearts where you're asking us, and what is our responsibility in sharing your love with others. Lord, each of us has a unique personality and a unique way that we can take this to the world where we're comfortable. But Lord, push us, nudge us, and let us feel comfortable in knowing that this is your work and we should be proud to do it. We ask all of this in your precious Son's name. Amen. Both the books and the workbooks have been ordered in for your conference and are available in the Cokesbury bookstore. And you'll get the 40% discount when you order them, buy them or order them here. They said that for you. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. I know I got it in there. All right, thanks, y'all.
Right.